I've been on this sub 3 hour marathon quest, and despite religiously following plans, I've ended up disappointed over and over and over again. As many listeners know, if they've been listening to us for a few years, it's been a while. Last year, so 2025, I decided to hold my goal lightly, as Alan often reminds me, and just train for the run and get in like a hard marathon effort without really focusing on sub 3. So I did want to have a good time, but without it necessarily needing to be under 3 hours, just, something kind of solid. I wasn't really fit enough for sub 3 anyway, and I had some other things going on in the summer, so I knew I might, go into workouts already tired or mentally checked out, that kind of thing. By the time race day rolled around, I had met a friend that had surgery for breast cancer and was recovering. She was at the same race, but she was walking a comeback 5K, and she insisted on waiting for me at the finish line. I told her many times that she doesn't need to, but she insisted and almost seemed more invested in my marathon than I was, even though like we had just met. In a weird way, this kick kind of kicked me in the butt um, to fight harder when the race got hard. We know marathons always tend to be that way, but I kind of realized that I was privileged to be healthy enough to be able to run and to be able to push my body hard without restriction. And I needed to do justice to that opportunity. My mantra ended up being run for those who can't. So I ran my first 30K on my own because, 30K in a marathon like should be doable. If you're running a marathon, you should be able to run the first 30K. So I figured 30K was kind of safe. I was just going to run that. But then from 30 to 35, I decided I was going to run for my sister-in-law who died of breast cancer a few years ago, and she was the same age as me. So that was kind of like a reality check on, how we're all kind of fragile and here temporarily. Then for 35 to 40K, I ran for my new friend who couldn't wait to run again. And for the last 2K, it so happened that my husband at the time had hurt his back. He was not at the race, which usually he would be. Um, and he could actually barely get off the couch. So I said, for the last 2K, I'm going to channel my inner Andre. I'm just going to run as hard as I can because that's kind of his style. Well, today's interview is with an author who lost three people she was extremely close to and managed to keep on running. So maybe we'll find out if her perspective about performance or just running in general has also shifted with all those experiences. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk today with author Lisa Jackson about her book, her new book, because she has multiple books, Still Running After All These Tears.
Let me tell you a little overview of the book. Lisa didn't think anything could be more devastating than the death of her beloved husband, Graham. But then she also lost her sister and her father too, all in the space of 17 months. Feeling utterly broken as she navigated these bereavements, Lisa turned to an old friend that had helped her through many tough times before: running. But whereas it had previously been a source of solace, fun, and companionship, before long, a debilitating injury meant that she lost her running mojo too. Aiming to complete her 109th marathon in Graham's honor, Lisa set out to rekindle her love affair with running and build a new life by the sea. As she laughed and cried her way through the miles, she realized running wasn't just helping her to get fitter. It was also taking her on a journey from heartache to hope. Still Running After All These Tears is a survival manual for the brokenhearted and for anyone struggling with major life challenges. It's a celebration of the redemptive power of running and the life-enhancing lessons it can teach us. Above all, it's a meditation on how to thrive in the face of trauma and what makes a good death, and most importantly, how to lead a joyous, meaningful life. So let me tell you a little bit about Lisa Jackson for those who haven't read her previous books. Lisa Jackson is a running writer and Runner's World columnist and the author of the best-selling books Your Pace or Mine, Running Made Easy, and The newest, soon-to-be best-selling book still running after all these tears, A Runner's Journey Through Grief. A veteran of over 100 marathons and two 56-mile ultras. Oh, I assume that those are the Comrades marathons.
Comrades.
Yeah.
Indeed.
On my bucket list.
Lisa is
Wow.
women's running's hypnotherapy expert, and her writing has been published in Psychologies, Red, Prima, Top Santé, Health, Cosmopolitan, The Guardian, The Independent, etc., etc., etc. She is also a keen traveler and, having backpacked through well over 100 countries, wrote two travelogues, Travel Sickness and Travel Agents, with her husband, Graham Williams. Lisa has presented talks at numerous events, including the National Running Show and Runfest Run, and is a frequent guest on running podcasts, ta-da, here we are, and the radio. She was one of 40 people featured in the Sunday Times Alternative Rich List, aka the Enriched List, as someone whose life has been rich in experience, rich in spirit, and rich in life. Lisa was nominated in the 2020 Women of the Year Awards and in the 2018 Women's Running Awards in the Influencer of the Year category. She is an ambassador for the multi-award-winning fitness wear brand Blanky Divwear. Welcome, Lisa. Hope we did you justice there.
Thank you so much, Alan and Liz. What an introduction.
So
I guess I was going to ask the first question, Alan.
yeah, well, I'll go on then.
Well, the first question, the listeners know, how did you decide to write this book, especially this one, because it must have been kind of heartbreaking to write.
It was actually the most challenging book. I've written 7, and this was by far the hardest book. But the reason I decided to write it was because I gained so much new knowledge researching cancer and researching my husband's treatment options and coping strategies during his terminal cancer journey. And I just didn't want all that information to go to waste. Because I knew it could benefit a lot of people. Many times I read a whole book and there'd just be one sentence that stood out for me and became one of my key coping strategies. And I just thought if I could condense all that information into a book, it would really help people. So I actually call this book, to quote the famous trail runner and ultra runner Damien Hall, a stealth help book. So people will be following the narrative of how I did my 100th marathon, how my husband developed terminal lung cancer, how I lost my sister, my dad developed dementia and prostate cancer, etc. But in among all of that are coping strategies woven in. And then right at the back of the book is the epilogue section where I just summarize everything into handy sections so people don't have to reread the book again. And if they encounter any of the things that I've encountered, grieving, bereavement, losing your running mojo, how to deal with medical professionals, you can just flip to the back of the book and find the key points there. So it was an incredibly challenging experience writing this book. I sometimes could only work on it for 2 hours a day because it was so emotional. I cried so much that I just had to go and lie down for the rest of the day. But what pushed me through was sharing this knowledge with people so it didn't go to waste. And also it's a tribute to all my family members who ran with me, inspired me to run. And I really hope I've done them justice. It's an absolute celebration for all of them because we didn't have a funeral for any of them. So this is my eulogy to my, beloved family members.
Well, I think you've certainly done a great job of sort of summarizing the tools and tips. There's about 40 pages at the back in the epilogue, which I've made reference to in my summary at the end, which is super useful. And there's masses amount of information, whether it's about running or about all the other issues that you dealt with, grief in particular. I think that last 40 pages is like a mini self-help book on its own. So good reference. I guess I come from a science background, so I always appreciate the people who quote all their references, and you've obviously done a lot of personal research. Probably should ask you, because we're on a running podcast, a little bit about your running background. I think it's probably more given in one of your earlier books, probably Your Pace or Mine. It's probably a lot more in there, but given that we're talking about this book and we're coming in at this point, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you started running and how did you convince Graham, if he wasn't a runner originally, to run with you?
Well, I was a very reluctant runner. I came from a family of runners. My mother was part of that very early running boom where people ran in tennis shoes. But my dad was a cross-country champion, but unfortunately I didn't inherit any of his genes in that department. So I have always been incredibly slow. And I remember, when people say to me, oh, the reason you come last in 25 marathons is you don't train hard enough, you don't make enough effort. And I can go right back to when I was 6 years old, and we had to run from the teacher to the swimming pool wall and back. And I always found that by the time I got to the wall, all the people in my class were already back with the teacher eating their fish paste sandwiches. So it's absolutely, in those days, I was doing my best, and I was just as unfit or fit as any other child. And I was just slow right from the word go. So my parents always tried to introduce me to everything in life they possibly could. I mean, I can't tell you anything I haven't tried, pottery or yoga or ballet, opera, etc. And so, of course, running had to be one of the things they introduced me to. So when I was 10, they took me to a Formula One racetrack, and I ran a 5K there. And I just really enjoyed it. That's actually quite strange. I didn't enjoy the running, but I enjoyed the checkered flag that waved us across the finish line. And I've still got the tracksuit badge that we were issued with from that event.
So if
So
you
that
were
kind of
in
stuck
if
with
you were in
me.
Cape Town, that would be the Formula One would be Kailama.
Kyalami. I wasn't in Cape. That's in Johannesburg.
Okay.
So it's actually, yes, but it isn't in Johannesburg. That's right, because I'm South African.
Yeah.
And so it was Kyalami. And then I didn't run for 20 years. I mean, my parents tried to force me to run 2K every day. And I'd often just, go down the bottom of our driveway, hide a book up my jumper or my T-shirt, read the book between two cars, and then sprint up the driveway and look all breathless and sweaty, and then go, oh, I've done my run. So I really didn't want to do it. But my father was an absolute nag and asked us every day, have you done your run? It was something like an ownership thing, like, your run of the day. And my mum was always talking about it being for my run. So when I turned 30, I realized my life could take one of two paths. I'd gained a lot of weight. I was unhealthy. And I really thought, do I want to be like this, or do I want to be like my parents, who literally on holiday would just quickly go and do a half marathon before breakfast? And I realized I did actually want to be more like my parents than someone sitting on the sofa eating Stilton out of a jar with a spoon, drinking port. It was kind of a moment at Christmas that kind of made me think, you've got to get a grip. So I hired a personal trainer, and he introduced me to walk running, which I'd never considered before. But I nonetheless got shin splints, which were very, very painful. And then a colleague, I worked on a health magazine, invited me to a Race for Life, which is a charity event. It's 5K, and it's to raise money for cancer research, ironically, actually, and how my life turned out. So I went along, and I'd never participated in an event like that. Everyone was dressed in pink, which is one of my favorite colors. And they were just such a sense of community and comradeship, and everyone just willing everybody else, across the finish line. And that just really kind of alerted me to the fact that running didn't have to be competitive, because I'm actually quite a competitive person as long as I've got a chance of winning. And when I haven't got a chance of winning, then I don't do it. So to actually attend an event like that and just think it's not about winning, it's about having a fun time, and also the sense of connection. In England, which I was now living in London by that time, British people are quite reserved. And to see them in this different context, like being so friendly and everyone talking to everybody else, it was really my kind of thing, because that's how we are as South Africans. We're very chatty and very talkative. So from that, I carried on with my running, and I entered the Great North Run, which Alan will be familiar with. At
Heard
that
of that
time,
one.
Yeah, I've done it twice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think I've done it twice, at least twice, if not three times. It was the world's largest half marathon, and it's actually very hard to get in. And my aunt got a place, and she said, why don't you enter? And I just thought, what, something with the word marathon in it, even if it says half before, it's marathon. And I kind of did it again because my aunt was a pest, just like my dad, and because they was brother and sister. So I entered that, and I entered very late, and somehow I got a place. And I remember jumping in the air, and before my feet landed, I suddenly realized you've actually got to run 21 kilometers, which is, 14, 15, 16K longer. My maths is terrible, than what you've done before. So I took the training very seriously. And I dressed up as the Angel of the North, which is a famous statue in Newcastle where the race is held.
Well.
So I had a little halo made out of feathers, and I covered myself in glitter. And that was the start of my fancy dress career, which has continued to this day. And we finished that race. I mean, it was really difficult, really cold. We had to run with our hands in our armpits. And we were so inexperienced. We didn't take a jacket. We didn't take any race snacks, and there weren't many available by the time we got there. So one woman came out of her house and gave us ice lollies to eat. And we had to just eat them because we just needed the sugar so badly. But it was like the worst thing. Like our core temperatures just dropped even more. So by the time we got to the finish, my aunt had her lips had gone blue. I mean, she looked like a little monkey, those blue-faced monkeys. And she couldn't walk in a straight line. Her blood sugar was so low. So we sort of grabbed each other's arms and we sort of, weaved our way across the field to a charity tent. We'd met the lady on the bus from the charity tent, and she said, "Come in, come in, come in," because our clothes hadn't arrived yet because my cousin was going to bring them and he was late. And they fed us hot tea. And honestly, we looked like we'd been drinking too much sherry. We were walking so unsteadily. And then we got the bus back to Newcastle from South Shields. And we just couldn't believe that we had actually covered that distance. It took absolutely ages to get back. And we just thought, we are just heroes. Like, this is just the best thing we'd ever done. And my
That's
aunt
so
at the time,
amazing.
yeah. Oh, I'm never. I mean, it was like me suddenly being sent to space or something. It was just so unbelievable that I'd actually done that. So then my aunt said, how about we try and get into London? And she'd been failing to get into London for 6 or 7 times up to that point. And at work, a colleague of mine was injured and she had a media place for the marathon. And so she said to me, "Lisa, I've seen your enthusiasm. I mean, I must have just talked to anyone who stood still for 1 second about how proud I was of myself doing this half marathon." And she said, "I saw your enthusiasm. Do you want my media place?" And I was like, "You are joking." Like, that meant that I could get in for free. And then my aunt, we could raise funds for her charity place. So together we raised funds for the charity place. I did London with her. I was injured by halftime. I had to just walk the rest of the way. I did it in just under 7 hours. And I fully expected blood to be spurting from my feet when I finished because I was in such a bad way. I was very disappointed when I took off my socks. I was just looking for the blood and there was none. And I was in so much pain, but I was so, oh my goodness, the pride. I mean, it was just this euphoria again of just achieving something that I guess any person who knew me would say you would never have been able to do that. So that was the start of it. I then, of course, wanted to run a marathon the whole way. So I did that. And then I was so bad, in such a bad way after that second marathon. My hips were hurting for 3 weeks afterwards. So my third marathon, I was so stressed. Again, I was injured. And I read a race brochure that just said, "Well, why don't you try walk running?" And I thought, "Oh, yeah, my personal trainer has mentioned this before. Why don't I try it?" So I did it, and I did that marathon 10 minutes faster than my second marathon where I'd run all the way. I recovered within 3 days. I couldn't actually believe it was a miracle. And I realized that I might have a marathon career ahead of me because I wasn't going to end up in a wheelchair at 40, feeling as terrible as I had after my second marathon. So I started doing marathons, and then, of course, it's 5 marathons, then it's 10. And then in the end, I decided to tackle the goal of running 100 marathons.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical, which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's Caffeine Bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. And it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor. They're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the...
Speaking of which, back to the podcast. Wow, 100 marathons. That's yeah, and actually you've since done a few more because you ran 109, I think, counting the one that you ran in Graham's honor. Yeah,
Yes.
I so reading your book, you talk about some of the ones you've done. Obviously, like the book would need to be 3,000 pages if you were going to talk about all of them. But you do kind of talk about sometimes not being as trained as you want to be, but you do end up, you do end up finishing and doing it, and it seems like it's still a good experience anyway. I don't know if you want to talk about maybe it's the run walk strategy that helps you finish the marathons you're not quite as trained for, or like what do you think the secret is? Because I think it's quite common that people want to run their first marathon. They're usually kind of a little bit nervous about their first marathon, and sometimes they get injured because you're all of a sudden you're trying to run more than you've ever run in your life. So I don't know, any tips for those people?
Well, I realized early on, obviously, that I was never going to win a marathon. I never was. And that I'm not, there's kind of catchphrase I have, which it's not about the time you do, but the time you have. So I kind of rate my marathons as experiences. And if I've made new friends or I've seen amazing scenery that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, because I've actually got no sense of direction. So a lot of the trail marathons that I've done, it's like a wonderful pub walk, that we often do, country walk in England. I do a lot of walking, but someone is looking after me and making sure I'm heading in the right direction. So I see it like that. The race snacks, I take my own, but also some of these races have the most unbelievable amounts of crazy snacks like chocolate and crisps and jelly babies, really nice stuff, and homemade Rocky Road and muffins and things like that. So I just decided to recalibrate what running means to me. And for me, it's a chance to meet new people. I mean, there's no other sport where you can end up just spending 6 hours with a total stranger, telling them your life story and hearing theirs. Because also it's very easy to talk to people in marathons because your eyes are facing forward. You're not looking at each other.
Oh, is that the reason? Because I've always wondered why that is. Because I like when I'm running with someone, it's just like verbal diarrhea. Like I just have so much to
Yes.
say. But normally I run out of topics pretty quickly.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I'm a hypnotherapist, so I know all about, what eye contact does. And
Mm.
this just frees you to just talk. I mean, I've told people things in marathons that I probably haven't even told my closest friends about traumatic events that have happened to me. If they've told me, shared something with me. And obviously, I mean, everything stays confidential in the marathon. Like I've never ever written about someone without getting in touch with them and asking, is it okay to tell your story? And I've been amazed, one woman, her mother died in Nigeria because the hospital didn't have enough oxygen. And I thought, would
Oh
she be
no.
happy to share that story? And she was. So yeah, it's always kind of private, but then if I want to write about it, I always ask them. And most people are honored to be, featured in the books and the articles that I write. So I just go into every marathon, there's always something that stops your training being exactly what you wanted, whether it's injury or just lack of time. I mean, even the 109th marathon that I ran in my husband's honor, I was fully committed to doing the full training program. I had it stuck on my fridge and I saw it, 17 times a day because I drink tea and coffee 17 times a day. And then there were just things that happened, like having to write this book. And what I found was when I run, I feel incredibly sleepy afterwards. I mean, when your training ramps up, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. I just couldn't keep my eyes
Hmm.
open. So I was thinking, I actually can't afford to do too much running because then I won't be able to write this book. And I was determined to finish it last year because it's already been a 4-year project. So, I just had to get it finished. So I didn't go on some of the long runs that I should have done. And it was actually so interesting to me. The wheels fell off at precisely in that 109th marathon, precisely the point I trained up to, which was 16 miles. It was just quite amusing to me. And they do say, the more you bleed in training, the less you bleed in battle, or something like that. So that
Hmm.
actually happened. But I just had to say to myself, there wasn't a time limit on the Brighton Marathon, so I knew I was going to finish. And that's the other thing. I just have an absolute no plan B policy. In fact, in the old days, I never ran with money or anything like that. It was you're starting, so you'll finish. And and that's my mindset. So I inherited that bulletproof mindset from my mother, actually. She was a very, very determined person, and it really helped me during Graham's cancer journey as well. So it kind of fit in, my running experiences fit into the way I got through his terminal cancer, the 4 years that he had cancer as well. So yeah, I don't care if I'm not fully trained up for something because I know that I'll meet someone who will help to get me to the finish, or I'll find someone that I need to rescue. So they call me the Mother Teresa of marathon running. I'll find someone to rescue, and then all my pains are forgotten. And I'm just so determined to get that person to the finish line. And then I always tell them, you look fine to me. Let's come with me. I've never lost a person yet, and you will be sleeping in your medal tonight. And I have to say, honestly, I've never, I mean, maybe I self-select a little bit because I look at them and I think,
Mm.
oh, they're injured too badly to take to the finish. But once I pick someone up, they are going to finish. And it always feels, I have actually got 2 medals. I got my own, but then I'm so proud of them for pushing through the pain. And I
Mm.
just know distraction, really, really helps. And chatting is the best form of distraction.
I think a theme in your book for from a running point of view is that you do tend to, I don't know, make friends easily and then talk them through their race or have them talk you through your race if you need the help, basically. But the power of somebody else and the power of friendship and the shared experience, just the use of that seems to be, you don't talk about it really specifically in the book, but I think it comes through. You just made a quote about training. There was another quote in your book, I think from Edna Kiplagat, where for walk running, you said she suggests that you run till you're tired and then you walk until you're bored. And I guess then rinse, repeat, then run till you're
Yes.
tired and then walk till you're bored. And there you go. You have the recipe. You're ready to go. Run, walk.
That is my favorite running quote, Alan. I'm so glad you highlighted that. I had the privilege of interviewing Edna, and she is just the nicest, kindest, most down-to-earth person. And she said she still runs, but not competitively. And when she said that, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I thought, what, an Olympian actually walks? So already I'd given myself permission to walk, but to get permission from Lorna Kiplagat, and I love that because it does feel like that. When you're walking too long, you get a bit bored. Like the road is not
Hmm.
passing under your feet
Mm.
fast enough. And then having that wonderful break, like when you get tired, like just to say, yeah, I can walk now. And that's, I think, a big mistake. I've even made it of thinking that I just have to keep pushing through because I've always done that. I've always tried to push through, discomfort, push through my brain saying stop. And actually just say, you don't have to stop. You can just start walking. And as long as you're moving forward, relentless forward movement, you're going to get to that finish line. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that quote because that's actually my favorite running quote of all time.
Also, in terms of friends, you actually managed to get yourself a special group of friends, the 100 Marathon Club. I didn't realize that was an
Mm,
official thing. I thought,
yes.
100 marathons, okay. Wow, I wonder how many I've done. I don't really keep count. But then I realized that actually you register with a club. It looks like it's a UK-based club, the 100 Marathon Club. But
That's correct. So there is one in Ireland as well.
so you're sort
Uh,
of a card-carrying member of the 100
yes,
Marathon Club.
I'm allowed to
That's
put that down as
amazing.
my club, that I'm affiliated with every
Mm.
time I enter a race.
Wow.
But they're a fantastic group of individuals. I sort of started by a man called Roger Biggs that I've had the honor of running with many times now. And when you get to 50, you're allowed to become an associate member. And then when you
Okay.
get to 100, there's a presentation, and you get this beautiful blue and yellow T-shirt with laurel leaves on it, and the words 100 Marathon Club on it. And you also, it's tradition to provide cake for the people who are at that marathon. So there's a massive celebration. And belonging to that club was really inspirational to me because there's many a day I'm not an early morning person, and I had to drive down from Croydon to Portsmouth, which is a 2-hour drive at 3 o'clock in the morning with my windscreen misted up, and I didn't know how to demist it because my husband was usually the one who did the driving, and I thought I'm going to die on the way to this marathon, but I was so determined to get there that I continued, and I was sitting lower and lower in my seat trying to look through this tiny strip of clear glass in my car. Thank God there were no other cars on the road. And actually, when I got to Portsmouth, I was actually driving on the wrong side of the road. I didn't realize that I'd come off the motorway, and it wasn't,
A
a
two-lane road.
motorway
Yeah.
anymore. But having that inspiration and being around people for whom running a marathon every week is completely normal, or people who run 10 marathons in 10 days or 12 marathons in 12 days, it was really inspiring. And, not all of them are fast runners. I mean, I've actually beaten some of them recently in the Brighton marathon I did last year. I actually
Mhm.
beat one of them, but she's done 570 or something marathons.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it's just lovely. Some of them, I mean, I interviewed one which became a cover story in Runner's World magazine. She was 75 and she ran her 1,000th marathon. So
Wow.
that's Colette O'Hagan, just an incredible woman, and she's just so full of fun. She doesn't take running seriously at all, and yet she's incredibly talented. So I just, started mixing with people who were pushing the limits, and it really encouraged me to get there too. And obviously seeing them week after week, because in 2015 I ran 28 marathons, and just having that companionship every time, and meeting up with people I already knew, and they sometimes bring music along so you can run with music, and just the chats, getting to know them was a real privilege. And I'm so proud, every time I have to type in what club do you belong to, and it's the 100 Marathon Club. So, I mean, the people who
That's
did
amazing.
100 with me at my time, they've gone on to do 5, 6, 700 marathons by now. I mean, I had to stop running marathons for 7 years because my husband was ill. So I couldn't, justify spending that much time away from him and that much time training. But yeah, they've carried on, and they just such an inspiration to me
Wow.
still. And they actually helped me through my 109th marathon, because I met up with them again, and just having those little reconnecting conversations got me through many, many difficult miles.
That's amazing. Actually, let's talk about because you mentioned already quite a few times that like you're not fast. But you've actually come last a few times in some of the races. And I think this is kind of I don't know. I think we should talk about this because a lot of people are intimidated by racing because they don't want to come last. Um, and you've come last and it didn't seem to be like very traumatizing for you. And sometimes it seemed like you had some friends back there. I don't know. Do you have anything to say to the people that are kind of scared off by racing because they might come last?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's actually very difficult to come last. You've really got to put a lot of effort into it.
Oh,
No, but actually, I ran 17 marathons before I came last. So, I've always been the same pace. So it took quite a while for me to come last. And then when I did, it was completely out of the blue by accident. And I was with a friend from my running club, and we were accompanied by the sweeper who was picking up all the race markers as we went along. And he was on a bicycle, and he said, "Ladies, I'm not here to chase you. I'm just here to keep you company, make sure you're safe, and to clear up the course behind you, and to take down the markers once you pass them." And when we got to the finish, there was this massive cheer for us. All the volunteers were waiting for us. The cheering, the shouting, the pats on the back, the hugs. We got extra goodie bags. And that had been my greatest fear, coming last. I don't know why I feared it so much, but it just felt like this terrible, shame or something. And once I'd experienced that, I was thinking, there's no problem. There's, no problem coming last at all. In fact, it's something to be celebrated. And these days, I'm a bit disappointed when I find out that I'm not last, because I think, oh, if I just slow down a little bit more, I could add to my total. So I've come last 25 times now. And I've never had a bad experience coming last. I really haven't. No one
Yeah.
said to me how embarrassing. Some people, I suppose, do feel, that that's something to be ashamed of, but I certainly don't, because I kind of think the people who feel like that are usually people who don't run. And I just think, yeah, but how many times have you taken the courage to go and stand on that start line when you've been injured, when you've been, well, you're just slow, or you haven't had time to do all the training? Well, probably no times at all. So I feel more sorry for them than they have to feel for me.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. So
I
for
think I,
anybody that's intimidated by running, there you go.
I think so far, if we've got anybody, our listenership who haven't done a marathon yet, you should be seriously thinking about it now, having listened to Lisa explain her experience with it. So you are quick enough, you are capable, you can do it, and even if you come last, you could have a really good time. So good
Mhm.
summary there.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about Graham and what happened to Graham. Maybe you can give the background of how he was diagnosed with cancer, but then in your experience caring for Graham and you were after that you were also a caregiver for your dad. But maybe it was a little bit different. Is there anything that you maybe would have done earlier if you could do it over, like hire more help or something like that? So maybe you can talk to us. Start by telling us about Graham.
Yeah.
Well, I was very lucky to meet Graham when I was 18 at university, and it really was love at first sight. Um, I just spent the next I felt like I'd known him all my life when I started talking to him. It was actually really, really strange experience, because he'd grown up, traveling the world. His parents were diplomats, and I'd spent my entire life, at home. He'd grown up in boarding school. in England. I'd grown up in South Africa. So it's actually quite strange that we just seem to have so much in common. But the thing was, my mother brought me up to value values in people. So it was more what's inside rather than physical appearance. Although I did think Graham was incredibly handsome, that wasn't the main reason. That I just knew that I was going to marry him. It was just every kind of quality that I admire in someone. You know, he wasn't materialistic. He valued education. He was studying for a PhD like you, Alan, and my dad had a PhD. So I knew the kind of dedication it took to achieve something like that. And he was just incredibly kind, incredibly funny, a really mischievous person. I mean, we just spent so much time laughing. I think if I have to say, the thing I miss most about him is just spending all day laughing. Like we would just find everything funny. And it's very hard to explain humor like that. At Christmas time, for example, there's a lot of perfume adverts, and he'd always act as if he'd never noticed that before. So he'd always go, "Is that another perfume advert? Is that another perfume advert?" And I go, "I do believe it is." And he goes, "There's an awful lot of perfume adverts at Christmas time. I can't explain it." And then we just kill ourselves laughing. Like we just had these silly things that it's very hard to explain to an outsider. So also, you know, he supported me in all my goals because becoming a marathon runner and becoming an author were my two biggest dreams. And I couldn't have done that without his support. So he did all the housework. And I worked full time and I commuted as well. And I'd work till 9 o'clock at night or 10 or 11, you know, writing, or I'd be training or whatever. And he just run the household, do all the shopping, all the cooking, all the cleaning so that I could achieve my dreams. And he even joined me in running. He actually hated running. He was an absolute running hater, but he did 30 marathons and two 56-mile comrades marathons against his will, so he said, just because I entered him into those races. I just used to enter him and not tell him. And then he'd say, "What are we doing this weekend?" And I'd say, "Running a marathon." He'd go, "Oh, you are joking." And I'd say, No, come, no, you just got to drive me there," because I didn't like driving. So he was incredible, you know, support to me my whole life. And then one day he went for a run and he came home and said he couldn't breathe. And I was so shocked, but I actually thought it was just because he hadn't done any training for ages. I said, "Yeah, you ran too fast." And he said, "No, you don't understand. I couldn't get to the end of the road." So he was very proactive about his health. He went to the doctor straight away. And, you know, through various x-rays and biopsies and stuff, he was diagnosed with asbestos-related lung cancer. So he'd been exposed to asbestos in his office at work in Whitehall in London. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to protect him from the terrible information I was reading because mesothelioma, this kind of lung cancer, is an incredibly aggressive cancer. And the prognosis for it is sometimes merely months. Very, very rare. I think it's 3 or 5% of people live past 5 years. So it was a very shocking diagnosis. So I did all the research because I'm a journalist. I took that burden off him. He's a researcher as well, so he could have done it, but I just wanted to protect him from reading that because I knew every time I read a statistic about the life expectancy, it would be a kick to my stomach. I mean, even reading about the most promising new trials was adding weeks to people's lives, or maybe a month or two. It wasn't, this is going to extend your life by 5 years or 10 years. So it was a very, very challenging journey. We were very, very shocked and depressed to begin with. We even considered a suicide pact. It was just so unbelievable. I did not think I could live without Graham. And then we took a decision to live in hope, not fear. And that was the most important decision I think anyone can ever take. Because I said to Graham, you know, if we sit here and just think about how you're going to die, or you're going to die in pain, or you're going to be able to breathe, you're going to be gasping for breath, how are you going to die? And we think about your death all the time, it's going to ruin the here and now. And at the moment, once he'd had his surgery, especially, he was fine. You know, he worked full time until a month before his death. So I just said to him, we cannot allow our thoughts to be contaminated by the sphere of death. And he wholeheartedly embraced this. I mean, I was so lucky. We were an absolute team. We had exactly the same vision. We discussed everything together. So I did, you know, in the end, I did all his personal care because I didn't want anyone else to do things for my husband that I could do myself. I mean, the only thing I couldn't do was administer injections, really. But everything else I wholeheartedly helped with. It was an honor. It was an absolute honor of my life to do that for Graham because he'd, you know, spent so much of his life looking after me. And it was the same when I went to South Africa to look after my dad. You know, he'd been such an inspiration to me. And to spend the last 8 months of his life with him, which I think were actually the happiest. I'd never seen my dad as happy. He's developed an incredible sense of humor, which I
Mm.
won't say was something my dad was known for before that. We used to tease each other all the time. And I just loved it. He just loved me unconditionally. I mean, the outpouring of love towards me was so
Yeah.
amazing.
It's clear
So
in the
that
book.
was,
It's clear in the book that
Hmm.
he
yeah,
clearly loved having you beside him.
yeah.
So
And
your commitment to
And
him was rewarded from that point of view.
absolutely. Although he had dementia, he never forgot who I was. Everyone in the care home knew my name because he was always asking after me. And I was with him from literally 9 in the morning till 7 at night every single day. I just went there because I missed him. If I wasn't spending time with him, I actually missed him. So, yeah, it was an
you actually
incredible.
mentioned something really interesting too. You said in the book that people at the end of their life, it's like all of the good qualities get enhanced or something. So it was like you were experiencing like his best version. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My dad, when I was growing up, my dad had quite a temper. And we used to call him Rumpel because short for Rumpel Skin. You know, the fairy tale character who has little fits and stomps his foot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And my dad just didn't have any of that. He always knew who I was. I mean, he used to play tricks on me. He used to pretend he didn't know who I was. So I'd walk in, and there he was sitting there, and he just looked right through me. And I go, oh no, this is the day my dad doesn't recognize me anymore.
Hmm.
And I go, Dad, it's me, you know. And then he suddenly just, put his arms out to me and say, Lisa, give me this massive hug. So I was so blessed to spend that time with him. And he had a very peaceful death because he also developed cancer. He actually got prostate cancer, which has spread his bones, and bone cancer is one of the most painful cancers you can ever have. So I was absolutely dreading my dad going through what Graham went through at the end of his life. And then my dad caught COVID, and he actually just fell asleep one day and had a very peaceful death. But the things he said to me, and I'll never forget, like he just said he loved my delicious personality. And it was so nice, to just have my dad. He wasn't as talkative and chatty as I am. And just to have him acknowledge that he even loved that part of me as well, was incredibly special to me.
One of the things that I saw in the book that you say around, I think it was Graham's treatment and exploring treatments, and quite a lot of different parts of treatment. One of the things you say is to accept the diagnosis, but not the prognosis. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I got that from a book, and it's one of those most valuable things because if you set a time limit on how long you're going to be alive, you sort of inform your unconscious mind that that's what
Okay.
you expect. And therefore, you're more likely to have your life end at that point. So it's a little bit like voodoo deaths when people are
Mm,
told, I put a curse on you and you're going to die next month. It informs your whole unconscious mind that that's the expectation. So,
okay.
we obviously couldn't deny that Graham had a very aggressive form of lung cancer, but they gave him 18 months to 5 years to live. And we found a surgeon who I've just met up with recently, who said, "Oh, loads of my patients have lived longer than 5 years." He told me a story the other day of 16 years. So we just said, okay, we accept the diagnosis, but the prognosis of this life-limiting sentence that's been passed
Hmm.
on Graham, that we just disregard. So we honestly lived our lives to the fullest. He was working full time. And actually, I think the surgeon was so surprised when Graham died because only 3% of mesothelioma patients have the cancer spread to their brain. And Graham was unlucky to be in that 3%. And he was also unlucky to be in the 75% of people who don't respond to immunotherapy. So he had, somehow the odds were stacked against him.
Yeah.
Also, he had a defective gene, which made him more likely to develop mesothelioma. So two people could be exposed to the same amount of asbestos, and one would get the cancer and one wouldn't. So
Hmm.
there were a lot of bad luck elements, but we didn't focus on those. We always just lived in hope that he'd be the longest surviving person. And people can call that denial if they wish, but it's actually a very helpful protective mechanism. And a lot of people didn't even know Graham had cancer. I mean, he used to sit sometimes, it was during COVID, he'd be hooked up to chemo because he had chemo at home. He'd have a white suited nurse sitting out of sight, and he'd be working and on Zoom calls. And people did not know he had cancer. There were many people in the
wow.
Foreign Office who were shocked that Graham had cancer because he looked so healthy and he acted so healthy and he was positive. He really was positive. And it wasn't fake positivity; it was authentic positivity. So that's why we created a positivity book, and it was covered in cupcake stickers because I like cupcakes. It makes me feel happy when I look at them. And we just wrote down every single factor that was positive, about Graham's cancer. Like he was one of only 200, out of 200 people, he was one of two who didn't have to have a blood transfusion during his surgery. He had the best kind of mesothelioma that was more treatable and people lived longer, etc. And then comments that people made about us and our resilience. And, if you can get through comrades, you can get through this, all that kind of stuff we put in that book. So it was a continual reference and reinforcement of the positive things that were happening, because there's always positive things in any negative situation. There are always positive things, but you forget about them because we're trained to remember the bad things as a survival mechanism. So we just focused on the positive. And honestly, we traveled to 22 countries in 2 years while he was ill. And then COVID hit, so we didn't travel. And in those 2 years, we wrote 2 travel logs, Travel Seekness and Travel Agents. So we made the most of, every minute that he had in this life. And also, I'd really pushed Graham. I'm very goal orientated. So, we had gone to 100 countries together, etc. And that was me pushing him. So I didn't know he was going to die young. I mean, he died at 58. But if you looked at his life, what he achieved in 58 years, writing 2 books, traveling to 108 countries, whatever it was at that time, it was fewer countries, so over 100, doing all those marathons, doing comrades, he packed it all in. And it was the pressure from me because I am a real go-getter in that respect. But he told me he forgave running. It was quite interesting. Just before he died, he said to me, I forgive you for forcing me into all those marathons. Like, actually, I did secretly like doing them. I knew it was because he was so stubborn. If he didn't want to do them, really, he would never have done them.
Yeah.
And he just said, it just brought me so much joy and us closer together. And obviously, it helped him with his early diagnosis as well. So, all was forgiven in the end.
And he did end up running during his treatment as well, I think,
Yes.
right? And because I think you had read that exercise is actually good for cancer patients.
Absolutely. I mean, every cancer patient is different. Cancer patient is different. So some people, can't even run to the post box. But Graham kept up the running as much as he possibly could. I mean, there are some preliminary studies that show it can enhance the effectiveness of chemo. It obviously boosts your mood incredibly because when you're a cancer patient, the danger of anxiety and depression is very high, the likelihood of it developing. So, I mean, the first thing he did when he finished his first rounds of chemo was run a half marathon in the Czech Republic. And he managed to finish, got his medal. Oh, he was chuffed. In fact, I've just commissioned a bronze statue of Graham. And it's that day that he ran his half marathon. And I got kicked off the course for being too slow, which was the first for me in a half marathon. So the guys in bicycles came up and said, get off the course. So I slunk home to my hotel and there was Graham beaming, with his medal around his neck. And we sent the photo to his surgeon and his surgeon's wife, who's also a runner. And that was a massive triumph. And Graham said to me, not bad for an old man who's just finished chemo. I was so proud of him. Honestly, you've never seen a grin like that on his face. And that's what I've captured in this bronze that I've commissioned.
And I think often as runners, we think of running as a health related thing. You think, okay, it will keep you healthy. But in fact, it seems to be the mental, the can do and the positivity and the mental aspects of it that bring just as much, if not more, to your person versus some challenges. This is an extreme challenge, but it could be any kind of challenge.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, running taught me, especially running comrades, that we're capable of much more than we think. It just gave me this unbelievable bulletproof mindset. I was going to find Graham the best surgeon in the world, and I found him. I wasn't going to allow them to give Graham only 4 rounds of chemo when we had agreed on 6. I had such fighting spirit, and I knew that I could overcome myself and my own limitations. And I also knew that I could push other people, to do the right thing. So, running, I mean, obviously it gives you time away from your computer. It gives you headspace to think things through. St. Augustine said it is solved through walking, but it's also solved through running or walk running. So I don't think I could have got through those 4 years if I wasn't running. I didn't run nearly as much as I should have, I'll be honest with you. I told you why I didn't do marathons. I just didn't have the fight in me because every marathon was a fight with myself to get across the finish line. But it's tempting to eat junk food, which we'd never really eaten before. I sometimes, indulged in things like KFC. I don't think I'd eaten KFC for 10 years. And when Graham got sick, I want to eat KFC and chocolate and wine and things like that. but those are not helpful
Mhm.
coping strategies really. And I really want to encourage people, just going for a 5-minute run. I just wish I'd really reduced my expectations of running. And I could have just said to myself, you know what,
Mhm.
Lisa, just go for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a fight with yourself. It doesn't have to be, achieving a 5K or anything. Just go for 5 minutes, because that would have made a massive difference. And the other thing
Mhm.
that I've learned through regaining my running mojo was the importance of warming up. I just thought it was an absolute waste of time. And I never, ever once warmed up. I'd literally, I really want to be taken in a wheelbarrow to the start line of a marathon, so that I didn't waste any energy, doing miles that didn't count. And it's the same with training runs. And then I discovered that just going out and doing a 5-minute walk, and I don't care who I'm with, I could be on a podcast running with someone, or I could be with my running buddy or on my own. That is a non-negotiable now. I walk for those 5 minutes. It releases synovial fluid in your joints. And it just makes, when you do start running, so much more comfortable and so much
Mm.
less dramatic.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've learned the hard way, how important that warm up really is. I mean, I don't do, dynamic stretches like funny walks and things like that, because I am doing it in public, and I don't really, I think people think I'm crazy enough with my flamingo hat anyway. But definitely the walking thing has made a massive difference. And I just, if anyone takes any messages from my book, it should just be, that 5-minute run can be the difference between a day spent in depression, a day
Yeah.
feeling bad about yourself, and a day that you feel you've got the energy and the power to carry on fighting.
I think also that 5 minutes could be the difference between you getting a run and not, because we kind of had a little bit the same rule. I remember my coach at one point, this was my previous coach, so quite a few years ago. He said, don't decide while you're in your house if you're gonna do the workout or not. Like, get dressed, go out the door, and if after 5 minutes, like the run is no good, like it's a no-go, then you go back home. But you always end up running. You almost never end up going back home. And so it's a little bit the same thing. It's kind of like, yeah, just get yourself out the door. Go 5 minutes. And actually, like for you, maybe sometimes it would have been 5 minutes because you had other obligations, but it would have been 5 minutes more than 0 minutes. So,
It's motivation follows action. It's not action follows motivation. And Liz, I've done exactly that. I never ever want running to be associated with negative things. So I have at times, as I can actually only think of one at a time. I got fully kitted out. It was really cold. I opened my front door. I got an instant brain freeze, milkshake headache. And I just thought, I'm not running in this. I'm just not. This is going to be horrible. I went straight back in. I opened my copy of Runner's World and I read Runner's World for half an hour. So I absolutely have a deal with myself. If it's going to be hideous, I don't do it. But the times that it's going to be hideous are very far and few between. And I also,
mhm,
exactly what you said, I give myself the get out clause. Lisa, if you're not feeling it, you can just go out in the fresh air for a bit and just have a walk. It's fine. But I can't even think of a time when I've just gone out and then thought, oh, I can't be bothered now. I mean, the hardest
mhm,
thing is lacing up your trainers. And what I've done
yeah.
now is I've got a new pair of trainers that don't need to be laced up. You can just kick them on. They're called Clever.
That sounds
And that's just
great.
eliminated that one, because I hate bending over because I've got low blood pressure. So I always find I can get this weird head rush and a kind of headache. And I just feel tired doing it. And I'm already tired by the time I get out the front door. And these shoes, my feet just glide into them and then off I go. So I absolutely agree with you, that you need to be kind to yourself. And if you make a deal with yourself, like if the deal is, if you're not feeling it, you go home, you need to stick to that deal. If you're really
Mm.
not feeling it,
Mhm,
do go home. But
mhm,
you will have shown that you've got consistency. And I think consistency is the most important thing. I think 5 minutes is
Yeah.
better than no minutes. And I've really learned that the hard way.
mhm. So I guess back to Graham. Eventually you lost Graham, and your dad actually seemed to be a little bit of a personal support crew for you because he had lost your mother. And so he kind of knew how you felt. Did he say anything that was helpful that maybe could be helpful to somebody else that's just lost their significant other?
My dad and I didn't talk a lot about Graham's death. But when my mother died, my dad said something which really helped me. And he said, let's celebrate the years we did have with mommy rather than the years we we won't get to spend with her. And that was such a profound thing to say to a grieving child. My father did not cope well with my mother's death at all. He couldn't come to the crematorium. Like he just couldn't come. And we organized the whole, it wasn't a funeral, it was a celebration. We had a gospel choir. It was held in the garden of our house around the swimming pool. And my dad was just absolutely numb with shock because my mother had gone out on a training run. She was intending to run the Medoc Marathon with me in France later that year. And a driver didn't stop at a stop street and went into fast-moving traffic and bumped a car that was traveling down the road into my mother and killed her instantly. So you can imagine your wife just doesn't come home from a run and you start phoning hospitals and police stations, and then finally you find her. I think my dad was just beside himself. You know, they'd been together since their university days as well, like Graham and I had. And that was an incredibly helpful thing. And, you know, I went into a very bad mental state at one time, just because you become very, very hypersensitive when you're bereaved. And someone was very rude to me and sort of said, get to the point, just get to the point when I was telling a story. And that just upset me so much. It sounds like such a trivial thing now, but it upset me incredibly. And I came home and I started drinking whiskey at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I felt I had incredibly dark thoughts. And I phoned my dad and I just started sobbing. And I didn't have that kind of relationship with my dad then of sharing emotional things with him. But he phoned me every 2 hours that whole day to check I was okay. And that meant the world to me. So, you know, he really, really did support me. And as I say, you know, there's an expression, talk me off a ledge. He actually really did talk me off a ledge that day. I don't know what he said to me, but it was just that checking in every 2 hours because he'd never seen me like that. I mean, I'm just not the kind of person who's prone to suicidal ideation at all. It's just not my go-to. So that was very, very shocking to me that something quite trivial could literally devastate me. But when you're bereaved, you honestly, I felt at times I'd been flayed, like I had no skin left. I was so hypersensitive. Like if a shopkeeper didn't smile at me when I smiled at them, or the bus driver didn't greet me when I greeted him, that would just ruin my entire day. So I think people who are bereaved will recognize this, how vulnerable you feel, how oversensitive you are. And that's why it's so important to foster friendships where you can talk to people and talk things through. And that's actually something I really regret not doing is I battled through all my grief myself on my own with the help of friends. And then I discovered a grief support group called Grief Works by a really eminent psychotherapist who actually was Princess Diana's friend and psychotherapist. And Grief Works, there was a whole community of people experiencing grief. But by the time I joined, there's an app as well. But by the time I joined, I'd already healed a lot. So in the end, I found that it was pulling me back into my grief rather than helping me forward with it because I was much further down the grief journey than most of the people there. But it was an incredible group. And I'm so glad I did attend because just being around people who understand. I mean, there's certain things that happen when you are bereaved, like you lose energy, like it's exhausting grieving. So you don't want to run. And that's shocking to you because you know running will help you, but you just don't have the energy to run. Or the brain fog. I mean, that's the most terrifying thing. Is just people's names, people you've known for 30 years. You can picture them, but you just can't remember their names at all, or any facts. I'm still suffering from it slightly. I just find that there's certain things I just cannot recall, even though I know exactly what I want to say. I can't find the words or I can't remember the fact. So just being around people who know what you're going through and know it's normal and that your memory will come back eventually. I mean, this time, it happened when my mom died, but this time, because there were 3 bereavements, it's lasted for a longer time. But just knowing that can be very helpful. And just knowing grief's exhausting, you know, because if you're a person who's on the go all the time, like I am, to not be able to get out of bed, you know, to just actually feel like making a cup of tea is a mission. Or having a shower just feels like, oh my God, I'm not quite sure that I'm going to manage it today. It's very frightening. But if you know it's just part of the process and there's no shortcut out of grief, I mean, that's what I had to learn. You know, I wanted to be like IKEA. You know, IKEA's got those secret little shortcuts and you can get to the tills if you just turn left. It's not like that with grief. It lasts as long as it lasts. And you have to ride it. So the only way out is through.
And I guess with grief, we've probably all experienced a little bit of it ourselves or people who are grieving. There's kind of 2 sides to the situation. There's there's you in your grief, perhaps incredibly sensitive and with all your nerve endings out. And then there's all
Yeah.
the people maybe treading on eggshells around you as well. So at the same time, there's the people around you and how they behave. And there's always the people who, I don't know, are almost frightened of you because you're grieving and they don't know how to deal with you and they're scared they're going to do it wrong. And then by not doing anything at all, they're kind of doing it wrong. I don't know if there's a standard recipe, but do you have advice for people whose friends are grieving? You talk about living losses, people who are effectively you lose through the grief, or you find out their real face through the grieving process. I don't know whether you lose them or you find out who they really are through the grieving process, but you talk about living losses. Do you have any advice, I guess, words of advice?
Well, that was something that really shocked me, that it really is like a fire. You know, some people rush in to help and some people run away. And I was really shocked how many people ran away. Felt it was very awkward to be around us. And, you know, despite the fact that Graham and I made a real effort to be interesting, to talk about topics other than cancer. In fact, when we met with people, we did not want to talk about cancer at all. We just wanted lighthearted conversation about any other topic other than cancer. And we really felt that we couldn't be a burden on our friends, which you shouldn't have to feel. But I was conscious of that. So, yeah, we were very, very surprised at the behavior of some of our friends. And I'm not here to make excuses for them. People behave in the way they behave. But I vowed I will never behave like that myself. So yeah, when you're bereaved, people feel very awkward and they are worried about saying the wrong thing. And all I can say is I can't think of anything that could be the wrong thing. And actually, you don't have to say anything at all. If you just listen, like to me today, you said, tell us about Graham. Now,
Mm-hmm.
hearing Graham's name said by two strangers, I mean, my heart just warmed when I heard that you say that, because it's very rare that I get a chance to speak about Graham. And it's just amazing that you were interested in him. So I just think all you have to do is listen. And someone who actually provided the greatest comfort to me was someone I didn't know very well. She was the daughter of one of my elderly neighbors. And she'd fought many health battles with the health professionals as well, which I had to do on Graham's behalf, or Graham and I both did on his behalf throughout his 4 years of cancer. So she really understood where I was coming from, that you hope for the best with doctors and medical professionals, but then expect the worst because you are going to be shocked by some of the things they do and say. And so she really understood me. And she just came round. It was a day I was supposed to write my Runner's World column. And she just came with this massive armload of sunflowers. And she just sat with me. And she wasn't scared of my grief. And we sat there for 3 hours just talking about all kinds of things, like really meaningful things, and just saying how it's interesting that wealthy friends are the most stingiest, and people who don't have as she said, I've never forgotten this expression, people who don't have a pot to piss in are the most generous. And here she was, just being so generous with her time. She wasn't scared of me crying. And actually, I didn't spend much time crying at all because I was laughing so much. That meant the world to me. If I had to say a blueprint of how to behave, it's that. And just give that person a chance to speak about their loved one. Another thing is just providing food. I have to tell you that the lack of energy means you just can't be bothered to cook. And we all know, you know, if you don't eat well and you start living on takeaways and junk food, you just feel worse and worse and worse. So, you know, massive pots of healthy food, you know, and just cook up a chicken soup, you know, they call it Jewish penicillin. Um, I remember when my mother died, neighbors came up the road with this enormous cauldron of soup and a basket of bread rolls. And that just fed everyone in the house, you know, for one more meal that I didn't have to think about when I'm trying to organize the gospel choir. So I think food is one of the greatest gifts you can give people when they're going through a tough time or when they're bereaved, and especially healthy food. And then I think it's just your time and just being willing to listen and bring up that person's name. Yes, you might make that, not make, but that person might cry when they hear that person's name. But I promise you, those will be happy tears. Those will not be sad tears. And the joy I get from the remaining friends that I can, who bring up Graham and say, hey, I was on a cycle ride today and I heard the Killers playing. And I just thought of him, that whole song. I just thought of Graham. Oh, every time someone brings up his name just out of the blue, you know, it's just so, it's balm for your soul.
That's amazing.
You mentioned the Killers, something that we never touched on. Each of your chapters has a song to introduce it as well. So you have sort of a sound set or music set of memories and reflections as well.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. That's more of a homage to Graham than to me,
Yeah.
because I grew up in a house with classical music only, really. I think we had like 5 albums. I think one was Queen's Greatest Hits, one was, Hooked on Classics, things like that. My dad loved
Okay.
Boney M. So a very limited musical background.
Yeah.
And then when I met Graham, he was interested in all kinds of music. So I'll never forget, he bought the Killers album for friends. And I said, Graham, giving someone a group called the Killers for Christmas, I just don't think that's appropriate. And he said, Lisa, I think if you listen to them, you'd really like them. And I said, I highly doubt that. And then he played me their music, and it just blew me away. And I've run so many marathons with their music, because actually I listen to Billy Joel a lot. So, and he just despised Billy Joel. He just thought, oh my God, that is
Mm.
so middle of the road music.
Yeah.
And so this was picking out all this. Actually, a lot of them are songs that were precious to Graham, but I just thought people really relate to music. It is the soundtrack of their life. And I just thought it's
Mhm.
actually another spark of connection with my readers. And a lot of them are songs that Graham would have picked out. So I actually had a lot of fun researching that. That took me months, because I'm not really that knowledgeable about music. So I had to try and remember things Graham had said and find the songs, because I couldn't remember what they were.
Hmm.
I don't pay
Yeah,
that
you
much
don't
attention
remember
to
who the
them.
artist is or the title of the
No.
song or something.
Exactly.
You just
Exactly.
like
So I
you
had to
can
look
hear
up
it in your head.
words. Yeah. So, and that has a lot of people have said they really enjoyed that. And just for me to commemorate, things like the first movie we went to see was A Room with a View, and that music is just so soul uplifting. So I listened to that, quite a lot, over and over again, because I rediscovered songs that meant a lot to us as a couple that he'd introduced me to. I mean, almost all of them were music I'd never heard before.
The book also is scattered with little silhouettes of crows. Or at least our copies are. We got sort of
Yes.
pre-release copies, and we hear in the book eventually that crow is Graham's spirit animal. Well, you both have spirit animals actually. You touched on your flamingo hat, and it seems your spirit animal is a flamingo. Very different sets of spirit animals, but interesting. Where does that all come from?
Well, I'll start with the flamingo hat. I bought that when I wanted to look glamorous in the Comrades Marathon. And my father had told me that, this is not some kind of carnival. It's not some kind of fun run. It's
Mm.
a serious race. And there's 2 rules. One is you don't do it in fancy dress. And number 2, you don't talk the whole way through it like you always do. So I tried to listen to my dad. Well, I don't know why I tried to listen to him, because he'd actually never run a marathon. Well, actually, yeah, he'd never run an actual marathon. He'd done a 50K
Mm.
ultra, and that was it. So why I thought that he was the world expert on running comrades, I don't know. But anyway, I tried to obey my father because I was a good daughter. But I wanted something practical. So my flamingo hat, which I can wear for you, is
Oh,
actually
cool.
just a baseball cap, and then it's
Very
got
good.
wings and a neck and legs attached to it. And it has this wonderful little wire that you can pull, which doesn't work anymore, but you could actually make the wings
Make it
flap.
flap.
Yeah, so kids, when you run past kids, they don't know what you're
Oh
doing. You
my
just tug
goodness.
it quietly, and then you flap at them, and they just love it. So
That is the
that's where the
cutest.
flamingo hat came from. I got one for my sister as well, and yeah, it was just a hit. And I've run in lots of different fancy dress hats, in the years, but that one I started wearing more and more and more. And then people started buying me flamingo mugs and
Kind of
books
your
on
signature.
flamingos. And then, yeah, and then you suddenly realize that flamingos are flamboyant. And I think I am actually quite a flamboyant sort of person. They say, don't be a pigeon, be a flamingo.
Mm.
So I think that is sort of my spirit animal. And then I started writing the Flamingo Diaries in Runner's World magazine. So that gave me the name for my column. And the crow came from me saying to Graham shortly before he died, I just said, send me a sign. Like if you're okay on the other side, send me a sign. And I believe in signs because my mother had a sign after she died, and that was sending money. So it was actually, I'd be having a hard time, and all of a sudden I just find a discarded coin, on the ground. And in marathons, I picked up coins as well. And I used to say, oh, thanks, Mom. And the funny thing was, my mother was a very non-materialistic person. So it was a weird sign for her. I found it quite strange, but it genuinely gave me so much courage and so much inspiration so many times. And in fact, when I wanted to become a hypnotherapist, I was really umming and ahhing about giving up a full-time job with a pension and, going freelance, so with a very unpredictable salary, etc. And one day I was walking through Victoria Station on my way to work, and I don't know what it was advertising, but they put out coins, like giant coins. They put out these posters on the ground. And so I walked on this carpet of coins all the way to work. And that was just a sign to me from my mum. It was just like, you have to give up that job now. It's time. You need to enter a new phase of your life. And so I did. And I landed a book deal with Simon and Schuster, almost immediately.
Oh.
I became a hypnotherapist, and I just love my new life more than anything. Like I always say, I probably work longer hours and I am very tired quite a bit of the time, but I'm never stressed. Work, all the office politics is gone.
Mhm.
I'm the captain of my own ship, and it's just an amazing job to be able to help people through hypnotherapy. So I asked Graham to send me a sign. I had no idea what it would be. And his mother had always talked about crows coming to her garden. And I'd actually never seen a live crow, which is very, very, very strange to me because crows are one of the most common birds throughout the world. But I'd
Hmm.
never seen one. I was always, she said, "Oh, don't worry about those scraps on your plate. I'll feed them to my crows." And I was at her house and I looked out the window and there was this crow dancing on the low wall outside her window. And it had a squirrel behind it. And squirrels run in that lovely sinuous way, like they're almost
Mhm.
like they're swimming. And the reason that was significant was we had a pet squirrel, a wild squirrel, but he was our pet, called Pekin. And Pekin
Yes.
during lockdown used to come and dance outside our conservatory and beg for nuts. And Graham would always feed Pekin the most expensive, hard to get nuts, namely Brazil nuts, which he needed for his cancer, anti-cancer program. And I was always saying, peanuts, he should be eating peanuts. Peanuts are cheap and easy to get. Why are you feeding him Brazil nuts? Like, only the best for my Pekin. And it was so sad. And whenever we saw Pekin, we just drop everything and just rush to the window to look at Pekin. And then one day I came down, Graham wasn't downstairs yet, and Pekin had just been attacked by a fox. And I saw Pekin just die in front of my eyes. And it was absolutely devastating. And I went and put him, he didn't look injured, but I took him inside and put him on our heated floor, underfloor heating, and he didn't revive. And I had to tell Graham, and Graham was so upset. And then we put him in a dustbin outside because we didn't want the fox to get him. And then later I just saw Graham quietly go outside and lift the bin and just cry. Like he didn't think I was watching him, but I could see him doing that. So it was a massive loss to us both because we don't have children. And it was a really sad thing. So to see a crow
Hmm.
and a squirrel at the same time, and this crow was so cheeky and it was waggling its tail and walking up and down the wall. And I suddenly just realized that's Graham. I just said that's a sign from Graham. And I told my sister about this, and bless her, she went and looked it up. And she sent me a blog, and the blog said all the characteristics of crows. And one of the characteristics was they were highly intelligent. And obviously,
Yeah.
Graham, with his PhD and his high powered job, he was. They're very handy with tools. They're one of the few animals that can use tools. And Graham loved DIY. He was really handy with his hands as well. And they mate for life. And I just realized it could have been Graham. This story, if you took out the word crow and just inserted Graham's name, it could have been Crow.
Hmm.
Okay.
It could have been him. And also in that story, it mentioned other spirit animals like flamingos and also raccoons, which was Graham's favorite small furry animal. I had loads of debates about what is your favorite small furry animal. So to me, it was just a sign from the universe. This was Graham. And I've seen crows so much now. I see them when I'm out running. I see them when I'm feeling down. They come to my balcony and perch there and waggle it up and down on the railing. And it's brought me so much comfort. And actually, even one crow, just definitely was a Graham crow, was I was running one of the first park runs after I was bereaved. And I saw this crow and it was swooping, like down in front of me. It was like really kind of making itself known. And then it shat on my head. And I was like, oh my God. I said, Graham, I knew you were here and you didn't have to poop on my head. And it was just the kind of thing. Graham loved toilet humor. Like, honestly, taught me to enjoy toilet humor. So it's just like one of those moments where it's just like, this is definitely Graham. So that's why I wanted crows to be a motif in the book, because they perfectly symbolize, they've just got all these amazing qualities that perfectly symbolize Graham to me.
Back to running before we kind of wrap up. Through all of this that happened, there were times when you didn't run, but you always came back to it. And now that you're sort of on the other side, I don't know, has running taken on any new meaning or any new purpose for you?
Definitely, when I came to Worthing 3 months after my husband died, I started running every day to my yoga class and then wanting to run back. And I don't know if I had COVID or it was long COVID or it was grief or what it was, but I got worse. Every run I got worse, which has never happened to me ever in my life. And in the end, I couldn't even run between two lampposts. So that really concerned me. And then I developed an agonizing back spasm, which meant I couldn't run at all. And my dream of running 2 marathons in Graham's honor that year evaporated. And I couldn't run for many months. And there's nothing like having something taken away from you to start appreciating it. And
Hmm.
so when I rebuilt my running again, I went right back. Instead of saying, why can't you run for 3K? Why can't you run for 5? You used to knock out a marathon every weekend or every second weekend. I went right back down to doing a mile and just being kind to myself in that way. And the achievement that I felt of, you said you're going to do a mile and you did a mile. It just felt wonderful. So I built up really gradually. I built up to a 5K park run. Then I did a half marathon. And then eventually last year I did the full marathon. And then meeting all those friends from the 100 Marathon Club, it made me realize there's a whole community I was missing connecting with. Also, I just realized how much fun, I couldn't say I races because I don't race them, but how much fun races are. And they give you motivation. They're just a fantastic day out. I mean, what else are you going to do? Just lie on your sofa watching Netflix all day and not. So I've really filled up my dance card, as I call it now. I want to aim for 100 half marathons. I also want to do a half Ironman someday. Not
Oh my
right this
goodness.
minute. Yeah, because I live by the sea now, so
That's a
I can
big.
train in the ocean. And I've got a bike path that's completely flat and traffic free. So there's no excuses not to train for that. I've done an Olympic distance triathlon in the past, so I do know what's involved. So I've got new goals, and I feel running is pulling me into the future. I mean, I've actually accidentally entered a second marathon this year. I'm doing Brighton again, but I'm also doing the Loch Ness Marathon, and I'll be going with a group from my gym, and they're really sociable, and we're going to be staying in the same hotel and just having an absolute laugh. So I think filling my year with these beautiful highlights where I know I'm going to make new friends, reconnect with people I know before, or see parts of the countryside that I wouldn't see otherwise because of my lack of direction. It just gives me a sense of excitement, and I'm inviting people I used to run with to come over from the Czech Republic to run with me, or my surgeon's wife. I said today, I just sent her an email saying, how about coming over from Switzerland? Here's a list of the things I've entered. You're welcome to do any of them with me. So I've just developed a different attitude to running. I'm no longer going to push myself through. I've got nothing to prove anymore. Before it was, can you power through? Can you run when you really don't feel like it? And now it's like, Lisa, why did you forget about walk running? You can just walk. So that happened because I bumped into a woman at a half marathon last year, and she said she was walk running one lamppost and walking the next. I haven't had so much fun in a half marathon in decades, and we've become firm friends. She's now sadly got cancer, but she's powering through. She can't run this year's one, but I told her we'll be doing it next year together. She came and supported me. She came to the finish line of my marathon, my 109th marathon. Those are kind of friends you make. People get out of their houses and come and help you to finish a race. And
Hmm.
that's the kind of thing that I just love so much about runners, is their mutual support of each other. So running has definitely given me a new sense of purpose, a fantastic way to have fun in a healthy way. It's helping me stay fit, healthy, slim. There's no downsides. And I'm so grateful for running. I'll tell you, I had this voice when Graham was ill saying running will be your salvation. And it literally was an auditory hallucination. It wasn't me saying that, it was a voice. And that has actually proved to be the case. I mean, running has saved my life. And I think if everyone takes anything from this podcast, is to think it can save your life too. And it can make your life. It can make your life joyful, full of achievement. I mean, my medals in my kitchen, I love it when I get workmen in, because they come in my kitchen and they're just staggered by this enormous curtain rail for the medals. And that's not even all my medals. Graham made me throw away all my 5K ones and 10K ones, because he said it would pull down the wall if there were too many medals on my curtain pole. So the sense of achievement I get, no one can ever take those medals away from me. No one can ever take my membership at the 100 Marathon Club away from me. It's just such an amazing thing that, and my identity as a runner has been reestablished. And now I'm never going to let it go again. Never.
Well, we look forward to the third installment in the running book, then the afterwards, which will be maybe a wholly people and running focused book that will be full of joy. Although this book itself is also quite joyous in its interesting way. Before we tend to give our own comments on, like, summary comments on the book, but before we do that, we should ask you, would you like to direct listeners anywhere who might like to get a copy of their own book or listen to it for themselves?
That would be wonderful. The audiobook hasn't come out yet, but it has been recorded. So I'm hoping in the next couple of months, there'll be an audiobook version. And the ebook version is available in America for you to order on Amazon. Apparently, you can go to bookshops and request the book as well, and some people will ship it out for free. Apparently, Blackwell's is a bookshop that will do that. If anyone's really struggling to get hold of the book, please contact me. My email address is Lisa, and then A for Apple, M for Mother, Jackson @gmail.com. And I'll always try and guide you to where you can find it. And if we can't solve it that way, I will send you an electronic copy. Because for me, it's really important that the messages in this book have the widest audience possible, and especially people going through grief. I don't want anyone to struggle quite as much as I had to, because there's a lot of signposting in my book that I think you'll find very helpful.
And if people want to follow you, are you on social media?
I am indeed.
I'll bet you are.
A very reluctant social media person, believe it or not, but I am. I'm called Lisa Flamingo Jackson on Facebook. On Instagram, I'm also Lisa Flamingo Jackson, and on Twitter or X, I am @Lisa Jackson 43. So those are all places that you can follow my adventures. I only talk about running and my books. So you won't find out what I have for breakfast or what my kitchen floor looks like. But there's lots of fun things on there. Interesting podcasts, books that I love as well, and my running adventures. Like if I do a race, you can see what I look like in my flamingo hat.
Or whatever other costume you decide to wear.
That's right. No, you're right. I can't always run in my flamingo. I might be going back to my monster hat for the Loch Ness Marathon.
Great stuff.
All right. So I guess I'll start by saying this book was about running. Actually, running is a main theme throughout, but it was about a lot more than just running. It was about feeling powerless and frustrated as a caregiver, about grieving the loss of someone who's still alive, about trying to figure out your purpose after a big loss, and about all the other losses that you might experience that no one expects, like friends who start making excuses not to see you after your husband was diagnosed with cancer. That was one of the examples. In terms of running, Lisa is proof that you can find joy in running, even if you're not fast. She has actually been last in a few races, as she's, told us about a little bit, and she's seems like she actually even enjoyed that more than not being last in some cases. In terms of the look of the book, the cover looks joyful, and except for the title that obviously it's still running after all these tears, you actually wouldn't know that it's going to be so sad. And the sadness comes and goes. Like, I guess it's a little bit like grief. Lisa tells a sad story, like the cancer diagnosis, and then she will talk about Graham and all their adventures together. So it's sort of a mix. There's sadness, but there's also a lot of optimism. Lisa talks about, trying to create memories with her husband and even with her father, when, she knew the end of his life was also kind of near. She actually explains how she ended up feeling closer to both of them because of the time they had together when they knew it was limited. So this is a sad book. I mean, there's nothing not sad about losing your life partner, but there's a lot of optimism and a lot of great stories and some tips to navigate that time if you're going through the same thing. And also for runners, I mean, because, we are running book reviews, I guess it also shows that sometimes you can be away from running for a long period of time because, it seems like sometimes there were months or years that Lisa didn't run, and then she would come back to it, I guess like an old friendship.
From the first words of the prologue, I knew this book was going to be great. And you will too if you read it. So read the prologue and you'll find out. Lisa basically smacks you in the face with a whole bunch of sad comments about her loss. And then I think kind of sort of verbally holds your hand as you journey along with her through her trials and tribulations. The back of the book contains a huge wealth of resources for running motivation, dealing with cancer, diagnosis, treatments, dementia, bipolar disorder, and your own personal grief, how to map your way through some of that. One of the books that was quoted in the story was the seminal work by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And like that book, Lisa shows that you can pass through or walk with terrible grief if you have a strong enough purpose. And running can help you in the development of that and the maintenance of that purpose. Lisa has a lot of running history, but I think in this book, running is kind of a little bit in the background. It's providing the foundation for more serious life challenges. And we see those serious life challenges to the fore. The book contains sadness. The way I've put it here in the summary is the book contains sadness, but it's not a sad book. It is, in fact, full of joy of lives very well lived. There are lots of funny moments and wistful moments, and as Lisa's explained to us today, particularly with her father and her father's reaction to her presence during, his last few months, a lot of joy in lives being lived to the fullest. And we see running as an important component in developing that joy. So good stuff. And thank you, Lisa, for the book. Couldn't have been easy.
Definitely not easy.
You've both, perfectly understood my book. It's just so, I feel so blessed that you took the time to read it. It's a long book, but I wrote it in 30 chapters, one for each year that I was married. And I always say, so people can read it on the loo. The chapters are short enough to go to the loo and quickly read another chapter. So thank you for, inviting me on. You've had such incredibly great writers like Richard Asquith on here, and to be, asked was just such an honor. And you really understood, the message in my book, and I loved your questions. And thank you for giving me time to also talk about my dad and Graham.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to the publisher Summerdale for providing review copies of Lisa's book. In fact, advanced release copies. This is quite a new book. And a big thank you to Lisa for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast, you'd like to suggest a book for us to review in future episodes, please leave us comments on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media or just subscribe to us on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and you're wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word, tell your friends, send them a link to your favorite episode, send them a link to this episode. Share any episode you like of our podcast with a running partner. You can leave us reviews on Apple Podcast if this is how you listen to it, or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. Or if Liz eventually gets her way, please feel free to leave us a 1-star review, as long as you explain to Liz why you're leaving us a 1-star review. She's determined to do that.
That's very important. I'm all about, constructive criticism, not just criticism.
We're also on a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com, look for a creator called Running Book Reviews, and you can see various little outtakes, snippets, various photographs and little activities and stories that we've written on there. You'll also get prompted to buy us a coffee, but you don't have to. You can read all the stuff for free. No problem. Okay, that's all for now from us from Running Book Reviews.
Bye.
I'm waiting for Liz to say bye. Bye. I'll edit that so it looks really smooth.
Oh, I love your bye.
Yeah, because that was
bye.
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 It's North America. It's a North American bye.
I was just waiting for my, for my little
prompt.
window of opportunity. Yeah, I thought you were going to, prompt me. I thought you were going
Okay.
to say bye first, but I was like,
Okay.
I guess I'm going first.